Penn State's offensive line just might be the best position group for the 2023 season.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And thanks for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast. And today's episode is sponsored by LinkedIn Jobs. With LinkedIn Jobs, you can hire qualified candidates more efficiently by matching open roles with people who have the skills, values, and experiences to help you achieve your 2023 goals. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That is linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply. My name is Zach Seyko, and another live edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. I really like doing these live shows here. Holds our feet to the fire. And joining me is another special guest. And we're talking Penn State men's hockey. We're talking Penn State football to open the show. And that is Chris Hess over on the other side. Chris, thanks so much for your time this evening.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's always a lot of fun coming on here and talking Penn State.
Yeah, and we'll get your perspective for Penn State men's hockey as they just got swept by Minnesota. That will be the final two segments. But for football, I think there's, we got to kind of hand out some superlatives, some projections here because there's just not a lot of news. It's the dead period. You can only do so much in recruiting at this point in time. And then you have winter workouts that just kind of pop up here and there. I think we've had maybe 4 or 5 now, with the way that they've thrown out the winter workout warriors. So, Chris, just in general, your first impressions from what you've seen from the winter workout news.
They're working hard. That is just number one. They are working so hard, and what the different coaches have been handing out for different players for, warrior of the day or whatever they like to call it, achiever of the day. I mean, it's somebody different every day, but then we're seeing repeat guys like a Curtis Jacobs who's going out there and battling. Bo Perbula has been turning some heads in the workouts also. Khalil Dinkins. So guys that are flying a little under the radar are the ones that are turning some heads.
Yeah, and the tight end group is very talented because Jerry Cross is getting some buzz. Talked about that a little bit. Khalil Dinkins going for it. He had the 3 sweep, but then Jerry Cross ended up breaking it up and utter dominance from Nicholas Singleton. Bo Perbula was obviously the interesting one early on with Drew Aller. So, we have the small sample size from this new team with the position groups as you look at the accolades and who's racked them up immediately. And you're seeing some of those breakout stars. And I'm referring particularly to, yes, Dinkins falls in this category, but Cam Miller, for example, in the secondary, a KJ Winston at the safety spot. Those guys are guys that you've kind of heard under the radar. They're going to be the next. I don't know about superstar. I'd like that to be the case, but I think guys that can definitely be playmakers, that can be solid contributors here. So with that being said, let's rank some of these position groups, and we're going to go with the best first. I think it's the offensive line. Chris, who are you giving that nod to as the best, all for whatever reason? Is it because they're the deepest, because they have the most upfront talent? What is the best position group on this Penn State team heading into 2023?
That is a really good question.
It can be a tie. That's not fun, but it can be a tie if you have that.
I'm going to go with a 1A and 1B sort of situation. I'm going to go talent-wise, running back. I don't think that should really be up for discussion, that you have a two-headed monster, that one running back runs through guys, one running back runs away from guys. It's, salt and pepper, ketchup, mustard, fire and ice, whatever you like to call it, thunder and lightning, and Nick Singleton and Katron Allen. But then I'd say offensive line, like you had mentioned, that this is a group that played very well, in my opinion, last year and is only going to get better. That you have your core up front of Olu Fashanu, who's back. Thank you. Landon Tengwall coming back from injury. Hunter Norzed sliding to center. And then Sal Wormley, right guard. And then you have a battle for right tackle, Caden Wallace. Or do you have Caden Wallace move into the interior? Drew Shelton. And then you can't forget about the young guns of Javen Williams and Alex Birchmeyer coming into the fire also. There's just so many options that you have. And you have Vega Ione as well, who's really good in the interior. That, this is a position group that was once a concern And now you're looking at it with some serious optimism.
Yeah, and getting a guy like Chimney Ono in the cycle as well, because this was a team that early on in the transfer portal, it's okay, look for wide receivers, but one of the position groups, offensive tackle. And I thought that, wow, you have Caden Wallace coming, unless they knew something that we didn't. And I think that was the case of, well, Bryce Effner was going to medically retire. And he did so. They knew that, or at least were preparing for it. And so I think a Chimney Ono actually offsets that, just in the fact that now you have more quality athletic depth. You're not relying on the preferred run-ons to be those guys on the scout team. And now you have guys that can develop potentially like a Drew Shelton, someone that, no, you don't want them starting day one. You don't want them to see the football field whatsoever. But maybe down the stretch of the season, when numbers start to get a little thin, and that's why I put offensive line, because they are the deepest that they've been. 2013, 2014, 2015, when James Franklin was, of course, starting here, scholarships were limited. And you really didn't have any options. You couldn't have competition. That's another big thing, is that this offensive line can compete, because I'm not sold on the starting offensive line of, okay, Olu Fashanu is there at left tackle, but I think you bring up a great point that Caden Wallace at right tackle, his spot is a little vulnerable. I even think at the right guard spot, I think that's a little vulnerable. And I think someone like a Vanga Ioane can take that over. A JB Nelson could take that over. Is Landon Tangwall going to be 100%? I don't know about that. Is Hunter Norzad, who's played tackle his entire career and then switched over to guard, and now he's playing center for the first time, other than a few practice reps before a couple home football games. So is that going to be the case? Nick Dawkins is a good backup, a quality backup at center. You have Drew Shelton, who can come in at the drop of a pin and can even start at right tackle if they need him. So, and then of course the freshman you mentioned. So who's the worst position? Well, I guess who's the weakest link? I don't think any position group on this team is necessarily bad, because I have them right now as the number 4 team in the country. If I'm in college football playoff, takes the top 4. So they're 4th. So who is the weakest link on this team?
I would say defensive line at the moment.
Okay.
There's no doubt in my mind that defensive line is talented. They have guys waiting in the wings. The guys that are currently there right now are extremely talented. The one concern I have is just that they're very undersized. They don't have a PJ Mustipher-esque player on that defensive line right now. And PJ Mustipher is, like I had mentioned the last time when we were previewing the Rose Bowl, guys like that don't grow on trees. They are a dime a dozen. And, Keziah Izzard, really, really good, 285 pounds. Devon Ellis, pushing 300 pounds. You need a guy on that defensive line who's well north of 300 pounds, but moves like a butterfly freely, moves around nice and easy, and can, plug gaps and cause traffic that frees up everybody else. And I'm just not sure that they have a player like that on the defensive line right now. Now, that's not me saying that one of those guys I had mentioned or someone waiting in the wings can be that guy, but right now that's just sort of a foggy area.
I think Zane Durant's that player. If you're thinking of one, of course you have Chop Robinson and Adisa Isaac on the outside. Defensive line is the whole group, but I think people are more concerned about defensive tackle because Dennis Sutton's in this group. Zariah Fisher's back from his injury. You're really at defensive end at pass rusher. I am not all that concerned, but I think you bring up a good point. There's not a proven guy at defensive line. And you're fortunate enough last season that PJ Mustipher was able to come back from his injury the way that he did. So we're kind of seeing the same thing with Zariah Fisher. But I totally get your concern there, especially in the middle. I'm going to be boring and go with special teams. Barney Amore, gone. And he turned into a punter that was very serviceable, very capable, and I think might get a shot in the NFL with the way that he's been working and impressing some scouts. But that's in the past now. You're turning it over to Alex Bacchetta, who we've seen limited, heard great things about, most likely, right? We don't know that for sure. Is that going to be Gabe Wosu? Is that going to be Alex Bacchetta, who fumbled that punt in the Rutgers game and got bailed out with a penalty, right? Fumbled the snap. And then on top of that, Jake Pinniger's gone. Okay. Jake Pinniger, interestingly enough, he was inconsistent. He was solid, but he was very inconsistent at times. And now you're turning that over to who exactly? Is this Sanders Sahaydak? And if Sanders Sahaydak was as good and reliable, why wasn't he able to really challenge Jake Pinniger for some maybe some reps when Pinniger was really struggling there. So I'm going to go with and you also lose Chris Stoll at long snapper. You lose a veteran, you lose a captain. So this special teams is getting a complete makeover. Who's going to do kickoffs? Pinniger was doing kickoffs at the end of the season, and you bring in the two transfers. So I'm just not, I'm not sold. And we saw what an asset Jordan Stout was as the place kicker, as the punter, and as the kickoff specialist. And now you don't have any of that.
You also have Riley Thompson in the equation. The
Alex Falcons
from Columbia, Riley Thompson from Florida Atlantic. So there's going to be a lot of competition for both the kicker and the punter. And you also have to figure out who your long snapper is as well. So there's a lot to figure out right now. And there's talent there. Falcons is one of the best kickers in the Ivy League. And Thompson was a great punter in the Conference USA for Florida Atlantic. That there's talent there. But again, how much do we really know about these guys? How are they going to perform at the Power 5 level?
He's Chris Hess. I am Zach Seyko. We're going to get into Penn State men's hockey next. But first, a word from our sponsor, and that is LinkedIn Jobs. As a small business owner or hiring manager, you know that success in 2023 all depends on the team members you surround yourself with. That's why you got to check out LinkedIn Jobs. With LinkedIn Jobs, you can hire qualified candidates more efficiently by matching open roles with people who have the skills, values, and experiences to help achieve your goals. LinkedIn Jobs helps you quickly attract qualified candidates to your open jobs with targeting tools. They go beyond resume data by using insights from your job post, company, and their 875 million member profiles to put your post in front of the most qualified candidates. Identify the most qualified candidates on LinkedIn Jobs and connect with them fast and for free. LinkedIn Jobs makes it easy to screen and rate applicants based on your job qualifications, all on one platform. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That is linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. And thanks again for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. Make sure you check out Locked On College Basketball. March Madness is getting ever so close. Locked On College Basketball, everything you need to know about college basketball in one place. Plus, you get to hear from big name experts, insiders, players, and coaches. That is Locked On College Basketball, available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast. My name is Zach Seyko. He's Chris Hess, special guest. And we bring you on, Chris. You have the football expertise. You definitely have the Penn State men's hockey expertise. Saw you at the game Friday. Good to run into you.
Good to run into you as well.
So let's just begin here. Which one hurts more? The total dominance of Minnesota in game one or the heartbreaker in game two? Just real quickly, which one do you think burns a little more as a Penn State fan or as that Penn State hockey team?
The heartbreaker.
Okay.
I don't think personally, I don't think there's any debate. You know, games like that where you lose 7-2 happen, that nothing clicks and the other team just dominates you. But then the heartbreaker is the one that stings the most because you felt you did everything right and you just let it slip through your fingers.
Yeah, I think in game one, Penn State was definitely asleep. You know, you had the 2 weeks off and then you welcome in a Minnesota team that just is number one in the pairwise. They're just that good. And that's just how good the Big Ten is, because I think that would have happened almost in any case, whether that's a top 5 Michigan team that comes in, a top 10 Ohio State team. You're going through a little bit of a lull period. You're trying to return some guys quickly than anticipated from injury because you need to get back in your groove before, hopefully, we're going to answer this question, if Penn State is locked into the NCAA tournament. But Chris, your takeaways from this series, because I don't know. I was disappointed. I thought, especially at the end, you know, it's not like you were leading 2-1 for most of the third period. You got the lead with 2 minutes, and I didn't go to game two, but I'm watching it in full. And it just, even with the 2 minutes left, even when it got under 60 seconds, I'm like, this lead is not safe. That when they pulled the goalie just in close, I was like, this lead is not safe. So that's very concerning to me for this team that wants to be in the upper echelon, but they still show that they're in the second, probably the third tier when it comes to top hockey teams.
It's definitely concerning, and there's no doubt about that. And when Bob Motzko started to double shift Matthew Nyes, Jimmy Snuggerud, and Logan Cooley, the pressure was on. It was only a matter of time before they would break through. And that line was responsible for the last 2 goals that Minnesota had scored. And that last game reminded me so much of that last Minnesota game in the 2016-2017 season when Dennis Smirnov tucked home the penalty shot with about a minute and a half left. Minnesota tied it right before the final horn and then won it in overtime. Exact carbon copy for that game just 6 years later. And I'm thinking to myself now, wherever Penn State gets seeded in the Big Ten tournament, whether that be 3 through 6, maybe even 2 if they get lucky and there's a couple other things that fall into place, they will see that Minnesota team again. They will see Minnesota again, and I will make a bold assumption right now that Penn State will make it to the semifinal round and they will play Minnesota. That's it.
Yeah, I mean, it depends where they're seated too. Now, Minnesota is that top team, so they will play the lowest seed. I mean, my hope was that Penn State was going to host a Big Ten round, and now it seems like, at least in the short term, they're going to be projected to go to Columbus to play at Ohio State. They've done it. Did it last year, so it's not like they're not incapable, and they're a very good team. It's just for a team that was top 5 in the pairwise, they've fallen down a couple of spots. But in the Big Ten, I guess those projections were correct because I was kind of laughing to the bank saying, I was right. Penn State was going to be this top tier team. What do the coaches know, saying that Penn State's going to finish 6th in the Big Ten? Lo and behold, they're 6th in the Big Ten. Crazy enough, even though they're top right now, they're 7th in the pairwise.
That's just how loaded the Big Ten is this year, that I don't think being in 6th is going to last long because Michigan State's season, or regular season, is finished. They are on the bye week next week. So Justin Chevalella, who's an insider for Com Radio, did a really good job of mapping out all the different scenarios on his Twitter page. And in his opinion, he feels that the number 4 seed is the most logical case, which is Penn State secures at least 4 points against Wisconsin, and Notre Dame takes 4 or fewer points against Michigan. If Penn State sweeps Wisconsin, Ohio State would also have to pick up at least 1 point. And to him, that is the most probable outcome, that, 2 through 6 is in the equation. But I agree with him in that sense that I think 4 is the most logical outcome.
Yeah. I mean, Wisconsin's just bad. They're not even close. The fact that they're in the Big Ten tournament to begin with is just kind of, it's just whatever. They have no business being there, and they'll play like that. They'll play like we have nothing to lose, which is kind of what we saw them beat Minnesota just the week before. They did split with Minnesota, so it's not out of the realm of the Badgers are just a little lowly this year in terms of comparable talent, but it's not. If Penn State, if they do not sweep this team, what ultimately does that mean? Because a split is not doable here. A split is not a serviceable outcome. It's not an acceptable outcome, in my opinion.
No, not at all. That this is a team that you swept in October or November, whenever they played. It was one of the first Big Ten series that they played. You've had success against Wisconsin in the past, even when Wisconsin had all that, high-end talent, Cole Caulfield, Dylan Holloway, the upper echelon talent, Alex Turcotte. These are all high-end guys that ended up making the NHL, and Cole Caulfield specifically. That this is a Wisconsin team that Penn State has had some really good success against, and especially in the Big Ten tournament, that they probably won't play Wisconsin in the Big Ten tournament, but that's beside the point. They've had success. And if they don't sweep, they're putting themselves in an even bigger hole, which then could lead to an even bigger hole for the NCAA tournament.
All right, so that's a perfect segue into our final segment. As we're gonna, is it a foregone conclusion that Penn State's in the NCAA tournament? Are they locked in? We're going to answer that next, but first, another word from our sponsor of today's show, and that is Built Bar. Are you looking for a delicious treat, but you don't want all the fat and calories? Totally understand. You got to try a Built Bar. We just got through the holidays, and I know my goal is still to eat a little healthier this year, stay on the health kick. And if you're like me, you want to eat healthier, you don't want to compromise the taste, then man, I've got just the thing for you. You got to try Built. With Built, healthy is actually tasty. Seriously, they're so delicious, you won't think they're good for you. It's perfect for the New Year's resolution that's still going on. What makes Built Bars so good? Well, for starters, they're covered in 100% real chocolate. That is right. real chocolate, and they come in unbelievably tasty flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, and coconut almond. I'm not sure how Built does it, but these bars taste like a candy bar while maintaining amazing macros. What's even better is that they are healthy. Only 130 calories and 4 grams of sugar with a whopping 17 grams of protein. And now you don't need to wait around to get a box. For years, we've been talking about ordering your Built bars at Built.com. But now you can get them at your local Walmart and Sam's Club. That's right. Head to your nearest Walmart today. Walk over to the pharmacy section. Grab yourself a box of Built bars. You can pick up a 4-bar box of cookies and cream, double chocolate, or coconut puffs. And if you're close to Sam's Club, run in and grab a 13-bar box with hit flavors like brownie batter and churro. You can thank me later. It is Locked On Nittany Lions. My name is Zach Seyko. Chris Hess, final segment, still talking about Penn State men's hockey. If you got a question, feel free to type it in the chat here on YouTube in the comments section. We'll answer any thoughts, any questions here. Like if Penn State is going to make it into if it's a guarantee, or can Penn State essentially lose their way out of the NCAA tournament? Just one last thought on the Minnesota series, because it just, the passing for Penn State, and maybe this just has to do with, losing that chemistry, losing that streak, because there's that rest versus rust debate. I thought the bye week was going to be good because they did get a guy like Kerwin back, but Schoen's out for the season. They just weren't 100%, and they're not going to be for the remainder of the season. But you could tell in game 2 when Kerwin back, even though in a limited capacity, or at least not a full capacity, that team played a lot different, and it showed. Defense. He's a defender. Defense was a lot better in that case up until the final 5 minutes there. But Minnesota, even when they weren't scoring goals, their passing was just effective. And those two 18-year-olds, man, Cooley and Snuggerud, Penn State got burned by 2 kids, which really hurts. But I felt like the difference here for me was that Minnesota's passing was on par all the time, and Penn State's just was not. I don't know what that was a testament of.
Well, I'm going to be Captain Obvious for a second. There's a reason why those 2 18-year-olds were first-round picks. There is a clear-cut reason why that was the case, and it was on full display all weekend. Those guys have the it factor. And, whenever they make it to the NHL, it could be after this season, could be after next. Nobody really knows yet.
They're 18, 19 years old. It's crazy.
They're running clinics. It's not quite on the same level as the Michigan team from last year that had 4 of the first 5 overall picks on their team. That's a topic for another day. That was an NHL farm team. This is a step below an NHL farm team. This team is loaded, and those 2 18-year-olds are going to do a lot of damage, not just for the remainder of the Big Ten season and into the tournament. In the national tournament, they're going to do some damage, and then they're going to do even more damage when they go to the NHL.
That's why it's hard when you see that Minnesota. It was great for Penn State to get a win out there. I was surprised that they didn't get swept the first time, and that's when they got into the national conversation. But here you have that chance to kind of reestablish yourself, and you got a gut punch, and it shows why Minnesota is in that top tier and who's really going to threaten them, because they're sound defensively, and then offensively they had to get these weapons. And when you have the number 5 NHL prospect in Cooley, that's just that. So, but the question now for this Penn State team is, can they lose their way out of the NCAA tournament? If they get swept by Wisconsin and then they end up going to Michigan State or Ohio State, I don't know. I feel strangely enough, I feel like that cannot be good if you lose, because it's not like you're losing to Notre Dame, right? If you get swept by Notre Dame, that's a different conversation. But you're at home. This is the final stretch of the season, and you lose to Wisconsin, and then just say you get swept in a 3-game series by whoever you play, Michigan State or Ohio State. More likely Ohio State if you're losing to Wisconsin. I feel like that puts Penn State on a serious bubble here for the NCAA tournament for hockey, but maybe I'm wrong here, because they still are 7th in the pairwise.
Yes, they are still 7th in the pairwise, but I would say they're pretty safe, regardless of how they do against Wisconsin and how they do in the Big Ten tournament. The biggest key was they got all of those non-conference wins. They ran the table in non-conference play. And, you could debate all you want about, this team's non-conference schedule was weak. They only scheduled really Atlantic hockey teams. That's true. but that's how you're supposed to, pad your stats a little bit to help get that cushioning that when it comes down to the stretch of the season, you're not on the bubble conversation. You won the games you were supposed to win, and you battled in conference play that everyone and their mother knows that the Big Ten is top to bottom one of the most competitive conferences in the country. I think it's just a matter of where they get seeded right now in the NCAA tournament. They're slated to be in Allentown because they're hosting the regional. I think it's just a matter of whether they're going to be a 2 seed or a 3 seed and who their opponent is going to be when the time comes.
I think moving forward, they sweep Wisconsin, and I think they do win. I think Wisconsin will definitely give them a scare because teams that play like they have nothing to lose are some of the most dangerous teams, especially in college athletics, but you see it in pros too. You see it in the pro sports when a team's got 1 win, 10 losses, whatever. I'm thinking, NFL football, the Texans roll in and they take a team who just won the Super Bowl, the Kansas City Chiefs, into overtime, right? You just kind of look at those things. Wisconsin's that team. They know that they can knock Penn State off, and there's kind of that satisfaction of, hey, maybe we can throw them off their game as a Big Ten opponent here and just make life more difficult for them when we really got nothing to play for here. But I think they can beat Wisconsin in both games. I think Penn State, it's not like they're coming off a good winning streak. They got punched in the mouth by Minnesota. They're going to be amped up here, and then see if they can carry that over into the Big Ten tournament, whether that's a home series, hopefully against, I guess, what would that be? Against Notre Dame if they can get that 4th seed, or would that be Michigan State?
It all depends on what happens during next week's games. That Penn State has to play Wisconsin. I'll look at the schedule right now. Penn State plays Wisconsin. Notre Dame plays at Michigan. And that's Ohio tough. State has to go up to Minneapolis.
Oh, feel bad for them. So bad for them. They did get that win on the neutral ice site against Michigan, which I was very impressed with there. So Chris Hess joining me as a special guest on this edition of Locked On Nittany Lions, another live edition. Appreciate everyone who tuned in live for this one. Of course, before you go, make sure you check out Locked On College Basketball, everything you need to know about college basketball in one place. Plus, you get to hear from big name experts, insiders, players, and coaches. That is Locked On College Basketball, available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast. Chris, what's going on new for you? Where can people keep up with your personal work? What is next in your line of work?
Well, I just recently accepted a position at the flagship sports radio station in New York City, WFAN. So be doing a little production work for them, starting up pretty soon. And you guys can follow me on Twitter at Chris Hess 22, which is on the screen right in front of you. And if you want to follow my Instagram as well, it's at Christopher_Hess22. There's a whole lot of, it's basically just all the different sporting events I go to and all that fun stuff and personal life stuff. We keep it light. Twitter is the business and, staying active in sports media, and Instagram's like the soft side of me that I'm doing the stuff away from work, so to speak.
The fun side. Well, that's awesome. Side. So now I can introduce you as Chris Hess of WFAN producer.
Hey, we're going to get there. It's only a couple more weeks till I start up, but I'm excited for sure.
That's sweet. Well, I appreciate the time, Chris. Can't wait to have more chats about Penn State hockey, football, and other sports in the future. So appreciate your time coming on the show today.
Of course. Thanks for having me. I love coming on, love talking Penn State, and love hanging out with you. I mean, we got to do it working together at Forever Media a little bit last year. Yep. You gave me my first opportunity right out of school, and I'm thankful for that, and I'm glad that I'm able to come back and do this.
Glad we can have this relationship where we're talking about Penn State sports. Chris, thanks for the time and the expert analysis.
Of course. Thanks for having me.